Back. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, is recognized.
I thank the chair, and I thank her so much for holding this hearing, and welcome to our panel. Professor Goodwin, you there? All right. Ms. Goss-Graves, do you remember your constitutional history? So, Ms. Hawley tells us, citing Ms. Justice Alito, there's no provision in the Constitution that says there's a right to an abortion. Show me in the Constitution where the founders, in writing the Constitution, granted the right to the Supreme Court to review and nullify legislation passed by the Congress or any other legislative body in America. Does that language exist in the Constitution?
It's not how our Constitution is.
No, it does not exist at all. So by Mr. Alito and Ms. Hawley's own logic, this opinion is questionable based on the Constitution. In fact, do you remember when the first time the right to review legislation or the legislative actions of a legislative body was ever asserted by the Supreme Court? 1804, Marbury v. Madison, and it was made up by John Marshall, made up out of whole cloth. He said it was an implied power. No, ma'am, do you remember the first time, in fact, they used that power they asserted in 1804? Because I think it's relevant. Dred Scott, 1857. That is the first time in American history a Supreme Court overruled, nullified legislation passed by the Congress of the United States. How did that work out for us? It led directly to the Civil War, directly, because it overturned the Compromise of 1850, and it asserted that no black man or woman, freed or otherwise, had the same rights as a white person. They could never be a full citizen of the United States. A wretched and reprehensible decision. And the court, sadly, along with Brown v. Board of Education, which was a good decision, has a long history. Plessy v. Ferguson, Karematsu, lots of other decisions that tragically discriminated, in some cases almost violently, against groups of Americans. Now, in this case, it's half the population. And despite what Ms. Hawley said, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Ms. Hawley said she questioned Roe v. Wade. She did, but she questioned the basis of it. She thought viability was an inferior argument compared to equality. Equality, that men and women had the same controls of their own body and should. And oh, by the way, for the record, it may be true that Ruth Bader Ginsburg played cards with, dined with, and went to the opera with Antonin Scalia, but she got up in the morning and voted against him in every single case involving the rights of women to have choice. She upheld Roe v. Wade during the entirety of her time in the Supreme Court. Is that not correct, Ms. Graves?
That is absolutely correct.
So what about this equality thing? So do men have restrictions? Has the Supreme Court said, men, here are some limitations on what control you have over your own body? Any of them? I can't recall.
I don't know of any.
You don't know of any. So let's just, for the sake of argument, say, in fact, there are none. With respect to women, with this decision, it's a pretty fundamental restriction on their bodies and what they can do with them. Is that correct?
For sure.
Now, we've heard a lot of interesting talk about states' rights and when life begins and so forth and so on. Is it possible, now that we're going to revert to pre-Roe and the chaos that reigned, that, by the way, led to Justice Blackmun, a Republican-appointed conservative justice, deciding we had to have a universal standard and a basic standard that was a right in 1973. Is it now possible that women could be criminalized and or medical providers criminalized by some states, maybe even Ms. Hawley's own state of Missouri?
We've already had women who have been investigated and charged for their own miscarriages. And so
I'm sorry, did you say miscarriage? Somebody could be charged with a crime for a miscarriage?
Well, that has already happened, right? So we have already had that happen. The way that these laws are written in the states that have rapidly passed them, they would open up individuals, providers, and others who help them seek abortion care to criminal and civil penalties.
Astounding. I yield back.